Every developer using Cursor with privacy mode off just became a training data supplier for an Elon Musk AI company. Not metaphorically, literally. Trillions of tokens of your prompts, your partial edits, your error recoveries, your refactoring decisions, fed into the model that launched on July 8th as Grok 4.5. And the announcement that told you this landed in a blog post between the pricing table and the benchmark charts in a single sentence. Stick around for the number that tells you how much of this was actually disclosed up front. The part of Cursor's own release that nobody should have published without a lawyer in the room, and the structural question that nobody in the AI dev tools conversation is asking yet. Start with the timeline, because it matters. In February 2026, SpaceX completed its merger with xAI. In April, SpaceX secured an option to buy Cursor for $60 billion or pay a $10 billion breakup fee if the deal fell through. On June 16th, days after SpaceX's blockbuster IPO, the acquisition was announced. On July 8th, Grok 4.5 launched. The first model jointly trained by SpaceX AI and Cursor, built on a 1.5 trillion parameter foundation and, in Cursor's own words, trillions of tokens of Cursor data, which capture a wide range of user interactions with codebases and software tools. The chain from your IDE session to their training run is shorter than any of the coverage made it sound. Here's the part that should bother you more than the headline. Cursor's privacy policy, before any of this, was already doing serious work. With privacy mode off, which is the default for free and pro users, not a buried setting, but the out-of-the-box state. Cursor's policy was explicit. The company may use your codebase data, prompts, editor actions, and code snippets to improve AI features and train models. With privacy mode on, it can't. The threshold is a single toggle in settings, general that most developers, distracted by actually shipping software, never turned on. Roughly half of Cursor's users had privacy mode enabled. The other half were in the default state. So when Cursor says the Grok 4.5 training used anonymized interaction data, the honest reading of that is, it used data from users who were in default configuration, which disclosed this possibility in a privacy policy that developers agree to by installing the product. Legally clean. Operationally surprising to most of the people whose sessions contributed to it. Credit where it's due first, because the framing of a conspiracy here isn't fair either. Cursor did publish a privacy policy. The toggle existed and was free to enable. Business accounts had privacy mode on by default. The data was anonymized and filtered before training. And this is the same playbook every large tech product has used for a decade. Your behavior, stripped of your name, makes the product smarter. Google Maps traffic, Siri corrections, Reddit posts. The principle is not new. What is new is the target, not your search queries, your production code-based logic, the way your team structures a monorepo. The error you hit at 2 a.m. and how you talked through it with an AI. The half-formed feature branch you abandoned 3 weeks in. That is qualitatively different from knowing where traffic jams are. It carries IP, architectural assumptions, security posture signals, and competitive logic. None of which re-identifies you personally, but all of which feeds a model being sold back to your industry to compete with you. Now, the thing buried in the fine print that Cursor actually published themselves. The launch blog post contains this sentence, verbatim. Grok 4.5 has an advantage on Cursor Bench because an earlier snapshot of the Cursor codebase was accidentally included in training. An accident. In the training data. For the benchmark, the model is partly being evaluated on. Cursor wrote this in the same document they used to announce the model. That sentence is either the most refreshing act of transparency in an AI launch in years, or it is a quiet admission that the data pipeline between user sessions and training runs is porous enough that a company's own codebase ended up in there without anyone noticing until someone ran the eval. Both things can be true simultaneously. Strip away the marketing, and here is what the benchmark sheet actually shows. On SWE Marathon, Grok 4.5 scores 29%. Fable scores 24%. Opus 4.8 scores 26. On SWE Bench Pro, Grok 4.5 hits 64.7%, behind Fable at 80.4 and Opus 4.8 at 69.2. On Terminal Bench 2.1, it scores 83.3, essentially tied with GPT 5.5 at 83.4 and a point behind Fable. Musk's own description on launch day was rawly comparable to Opus 4.7, not 4.8. A generation behind the current frontier at a genuinely competitive $2 per million input tokens. The pricing is real and it matters. On raw cost, it undercuts Opus 4.8 and GPT 5.5 by 60%. The model is not a fraud. It is a capable mid-tier coding model at a low price, which is the honest description. The question isn't whether Grok 4.5 is good. The question is whether the data pipeline that produced it sets a precedent developers should be comfortable with. Here's the structural move that nobody is naming clearly. XAI needed something the open internet couldn't give them: behavioral data, not code. Behavior. The difference between a model trained on GitHub repositories and a model trained on cursor sessions is the difference between reading every recipe ever published and watching a professional chef cook in a real kitchen. Repos show you the finished dish. Sessions show you the wrong turns, the pivots, the sequence of decisions. That data has genuine training signal value that static code never will, which means the cursor acquisition at $60 billion wasn't just an IDE acquisition. It was a behavioral data acquisition, and the asset cursor had that justified that price is the daily working patterns of roughly 4 million developers, most of whom didn't know they were building something someone else was going to buy. Almost everyone who covers this story has something to sell: a newsletter, a course, a hot take. So does XAI, obviously. So does Cursor. The dynamic here is simple. Developers produce the behavior, companies buy the behavior, the model gets trained on the behavior, the model gets sold back to the developers. That loop is already running. It will accelerate. And other platform companies, legal research tools, financial modeling environments, medical coding suites, are watching and taking notes. The signal to watch isn't Grok 4.5's benchmark trajectory. It's the next IDE acquisition, the next coding environment that raises a monster round with proprietary behavioral training data buried in the pitch deck. Because the pattern has a name now. The data exhaust from developer workflows is the new GPU cluster. Someone just paid $60 billion to prove it. See you in the next one.